Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Sacred Womb podcast, where we talk about all things to do with befriending our menstrual cycle, deeply healing both our feminine and masculine aspects, and how we can indeed utilise our cyclical nature as a natural spiritual pathway that's encoded within our bodies. I'm your host, Melanie Swan, and you can also go to thesacredwomb.com for more information and loads of fantastic free resources. Hello, ladies, and how are you doing? How's your cycle? How's your connection with your womb? How's your metaphysical womb feeling? So let's start the podcast today by putting our hands on our womb and taking a nice deep breath so that we're ready for our awesome guest. Lovely. So our awesome guest on episode 50 of the podcast is Uma Dinsmore-Tuli. Uma is founder of Womb Yoga, and she has also written the very popular book Yoni Shakti. So Uma gives some really great information. She takes us through the difference between standard yoga and womb yoga. She talks us through what it's like in one of her classes. She talks us through Yoga Nidra and gives us some really juicy information to help us key into our own bodies and practice from a place of listening rather than straining and trying to reach somebody else's goal, really. So, yeah, here is Uma Dinsmore-Tuli. Hey, Uma, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Melanie. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to finally meet you. So, Uma, let's get straight to it. Womb yoga. We're going to talk about womb yoga today. Let's start off by having a chat about how that emerged, why it emerged, and then let's get on to why you're doing it and, what is it?
Okay.
Do you want those questions again?
I think the answer is better explained by telling you how it came about, because I think that a lot of women who are practicing yoga have wombs, okay, and we are cyclical beings. And a lot of yoga practices that are shared in the West, in classes and studios, have been designed by men. They're not necessarily taught by men, but they're taught within structures that are very fairly rigid, hierarchical, patriarchal. They've been handed down in systems that say everybody should do what the teacher says at the same time, all the time. And they also come from a tropical place. And a lot of the women who are doing these practices are not in tropical places, are not men, and have wombs. And so there isn't a very good fit. And that struck me especially when I became pregnant and started adapting yoga practices for pregnant women. Now, when I say yoga, I also have to say that a lot of people think it's about the physical body. The basic idea in yoga is that we have 5 bodies, not one. Only one of them is visible, the physical body, but we also work with energy and breath. We work with your mind, your heart, your feelings, and also the intuitive body. So and the 5th body is the bliss body. So there are 5 bodies at work, and that means you can do yoga without moving. You know, you can do yoga nidra and you can do breathing practices. But the basic model of Western woman shows up to do yoga class with her bleed, with her menopausal experiences. She's wanting to conceive, she's trying to get pregnant, you know, she's just had a baby. And these experiences in her physical body, in her emotional state, in all kinds of other aspects of her being do not match the standard system that is being taught to her by somebody who's been trained via, you know, in a good-hearted way to do things that are good for everybody, and they just aren't good for everybody all the time. So what happened over years was I developed different kinds of ways of moving, of breathing, of resting, different ways of different pace, different kinds of methods that made the yoga fit better and do us good. And I was able to do that because I'm a yoga therapist. I'm not a yoga instructor. I'm not a yoga teacher. I'm a yoga therapist. That means I look at the person, male, female, transgender, young, old, whoever they are, and say, what's going to suit this person best today? How are you feeling today, Melanie? What should we do? And you go, oh, God, I'm feeling full of beans. I'm on this stage of my cycle. I go, okay, let's go for it. Or you say, actually, it was a rough night with the kids last night, or I was sweating all night, or whatever it is. And you say, okay, so let's do a 20-minute yoga nidra with some gentle breathing. And what I developed was things that people will often say they're very feminine, quite flowing, spiraling movement. So it looks a bit different from the standard yoga practices, but that has all the healing, powerful elements of yoga in a way that is respectful to women as a cyclical beings, and that is actually nourishing. So a lot of yoga can be a little bit punitive, it can feel a bit like, and a lot of it, when you look at the history of it, and I'm interested in that stuff, comes out of being standardized along fairly military lines. Think about it. You walk in, they line you up. Yeah. They tell you when to breathe. It's not unlike a military drill. And there are good reasons why those similarities are fairly real things to notice, because the way that yoga was systematized is rooted in that kind of method, bodybuilding and military systems of training. And that actually doesn't suit many women. So that's a bit of a long answer. But the basic thing was I felt there wasn't a very good fit all the time between standard ways of practicing yoga as people understood it and what I was experiencing as a woman who was, first pregnant, then postnatal, then trying to conceive. So I found that what I was trying to develop was yoga that fitted better. I saw it didn't fit all the time for most women. People were actually not happy, or they were trying, in order to fit into the yoga model, you had to disrespect your own cycles as a woman. And I didn't like that. And the more I got into like cycle awareness and the awareness of how to nourish ourselves, the less convinced I was that it was a good idea to get all the ladies in the class, regardless of age, regardless of where they were in their cycle, to do the same thing. So my basic guidance is if you walk into a yoga class and everybody's doing the same thing at the same time, just turn around and leave. The only reason they're doing that is because the teacher doesn't know how to adjust and adapt and accommodate everybody who's there. And if they do know that, you'll walk in and the class will be like, and how can we make this more comfortable for you? And all kinds of things like that. So vote with your feet, women, I say. If it doesn't feel good to you, just leave. There's a million yoga teachers out there. Go and choose one that does know how to make it more comfortable for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be womb yoga, does it? But I mean, that's what I called it. Not all women who do this practice have wombs. They either weren't born with wombs, or the wombs have long since, been removed or gone, or, their focus isn't that. But I use that term because it made it clear that it was geared up to be comfortable if you did happen to have a womb. And there's also a sense that the energy body in yoga, so there's not just the physical body, the energy of what's called, it's the second chakra, Svadhisthana it's called in Sanskrit, is actually present even if the womb is not present. So the kind of fluid, flowing, creative, powerful energies that are in the second chakra don't need for there to be the presence of the womb. You know what I mean? So men can do this, and women who no longer have wombs or never had wombs in the first place also can do it. Which is why sometimes I just call it Yoni Shakti, which is the title that the book that described it, because Yoni is the source energy. It doesn't necessarily mean womb, and Shakti is power. So there's another term for it. Long answer.
Oh, it was a great answer. As you were speaking, my body was just relaxing and relaxing and relaxing. And I'm remembering all the times I've gone to yoga classes and tried, because I know that sort of thing is good for me if I do it and follow my body. But just, I've had one good yoga teacher. She was amazing, Nancy. But the rest of the yoga classes I've tried and been to in India as well, sometimes it fits. And it tends to fit when I'm ovulating. Because I can go and jump up and down. And
exactly. It's a cyclical thing. And it isn't just about the wombs and the ovulation, the menstruation. It's also about breasts and bums and women's joints. Like, our elbows bend in a different way. They don't do that straight up and down thing. They don't do it. Women's elbows are different from men. There's a difference. And also, if you're blessed with ample bosoms and breasts and bums, then they sort of are a bit of an inconvenience to the instructor, who's saying, well, you won't be able to do this because they get in the way, or you do shoulder stand and it feels like your breasts are coming to get you. And so for me, it was an interesting journey, because I'm a skinny little woman who rode around on a bike and looked like a boy. So of course yoga was cool for me, because I was like this bendy adolescent boy. But once womanly things began to arrive in my body in a way that I was like, oh, I've got to take notice of this. And for me, that took pregnancy. But then as I look back, I was like, actually, this never really fitted, because I suffered with really intense premenstrual challenges. And so for me, doing the same yoga practice every day, because that's what I've been taught to do, actually was really unhelpful, because it aggravated my tendency to kind of override the calls of my body. And my premenstrual challenges were very mental and emotional, and they were calling for me to like back off, take care, and then I would crash. Terrible things would happen. I get into fights. I mean, it was just awful. But the yoga that I thought was so good for me actually wasn't really very helpful. I would have been better advised to do a much more yin practice and that is coming through now. There's a lot more restorative yoga. There's a lot more yin yoga. So you can pick and choose. If you get someone who's totally not aware of cycles, it sort of doesn't matter, because you can choose the kind of yoga that suits you. For example, as you've mentioned, doing the happy, jumpy up and down, breathe in, breathe out, move around to loud music stuff when you're ovulating is fab for a lot of women. But then actually, when you're premenstrual or you're bleeding, you want a nice restorative yoga with a lot of bolsters and blankets and calm, restful things. And if I had been wise enough to see that, I wouldn't have had to create womb yoga, because I would have just chosen the right practice. But it takes quite an assertive woman to know, A, to pay attention to her body, because we're taught not to, and B, to seek out the things that nourish and nurture. So I'd say fundamentally what we're looking at is a practice that's respectful of feminine cycles and that is nourishing and nurturing and empowering. It doesn't call on you to pretend like you're a boy, like so many other aspects of our life.
I love that. I love that, because I've just never been able to maintain a yoga practice. I can do it when I'm ovulating. Pre-ovulation, it's okay. I kind of warm up. I just can't keep it up. And then I used to think, I don't think now, I used to think, I'm a bit shit at this, or I'm a bit shit at exercise, or I've got no self-discipline and I need to do it. And then I would try and go to a yoga class when I'd lost the ovulation energy and was in my premenstrual. And then everyone, they got their bloody leg between their neck or whatever. And I think, no, I don't want to do this. I just don't want it.
And your experience of resistance, and then also you start to feel inadequate. You can feel ashamed, or like I'm guilty because I'm not doing what the Guruji said to get up every morning and go do your practice and do your practice and do that. Actually, that's not it's not a helpful model for life. It doesn't help us to respect the cycles and rhythms of life. And the horrible paradox is that actually at heart, yoga is brilliant at doing that. That's the point of it. It's a technology for self-care. But the way that it's been taught, do you see what I mean? Like, I use a lot of very traditional yoga practices. Some things are more appropriate. Like, when you start looking at the ages of people in standard yoga classes and you realize there's not that many women over 50, you're like, well, why is that? Why? Well, because actually, you need complete control over your environment. You need to be able to open the window if you get hot and sticky. And do you know what I mean? It's not a comfortable place to be if you've got temperature regulation issues, as many menopausal women do have, or if you're trying to honor your cycle. So basically, what I've tried to do with the womb yoga is to respect and honor both the women and the bodies of the women and the power of the yoga to really nourish us. But you've got to be judicious about it and make choices. And one size does not fit all. And certainly through your monthly cycles, or however your cycles work, whatever you're doing with your life, it doesn't work to always do the same thing every day. Life's not like that.
Life just isn't like that. We need different things, different days. And I certainly need different even different practices on my transition days when I transition between phases. So say I walked into your class and what day am I on at the moment? 27. I'm day 27.
Okay.
And I'm dropped into transition to my moon time phase. So I'm really in my body. I feel really in my power, actually. I've had a good month, solid month. And I'm really looking forward to going into my cave and just having a lot of blood around me. But today I don't want to, my womb is fuller. And my breasts aren't tender, but I'm more aware of them. They're definitely more jiggly in there. Say somebody else, my friend who I've come with, is ovulating and another friend is just emerging out the cave.
Yeah.
And all three of us decide, Uma's in town, let's go for it.
Okay.
What happens in a class?
Well, for a start, you probably know I tend to take longer for a class. I like a 2-hour stretch because I work with seasonal variations. So if the three of you in your different phases all showed up to a restaurant, I doubt you'd all want to eat the same thing. You might want to, but you would look for seasonal variations in the menu. And one of you might fancy the greeny stuff with the zucchini and somebody else, So the class that I offer, and also not just me, because there's lots of teachers I've trained to do this, they will generally begin with a rest period. And I think that's important. A lot of people really struggle to get to a class and then and the last thing you want to do is jump around straight away. So I give people an opportunity to tune into their being and where they are. So we usually begin with a yoga nidra practice, which is a dream yoga practice where you snuggle up in different kinds of positions. So one of you might want to lie on your back, and everybody is doing what suits them. And I support them. I often work with assistants so that if there's a big class, we can help set up. So we'll often begin with rest and then work with very gentle activations. So that what happens is we step people down back into their state of being, ask them to listen into their bodies. Yoga nidra is like an internal weather report, like how is my energy feeling? How are my joints feeling? How are my organs feeling? How's my emotional state? And you're guided through this. So at the end of that practice, people are like, okay, I'm really here now. I'm really, sometimes you arrive, you haven't even arrived, and they're like, inhale up, exhale down. You're like, hang on a minute, I just got here. So the main thing is leisure and time. It's a very spacious experience. We give people time to settle in. And then after that, the activation process is a very gentle, like we're moving through the body in ways that give you options to do more or to do less. So I usually have an opportunity in the class at some point to do a check-in. I usually work in a circle. You won't be in lines. I'm kind of allergic to straight lines. So the class is always set up in a circle. And that's important. It looks like it's a cosmetic thing, but it isn't. It's a significant thing. And what we often have is a chance to check in. Say, yeah, I'm Melanie. I'm feeling a bit in my autumn today. So I use a very good shorthand that I learned from Alexandra Pope and the Red School people, menstruality consciousness. So it's not embarrassing. It's not like all of you ladies over there who happen to be bleeding now in your period, you go and put your legs up the wall and while the rest of us get on with the real yoga. No, we're saying like, okay, so Sarah's in her autumn, Sue's in her spring, Melanie's feeling like she's heading into winter. And then I'm like, okay, so I give variations. I feel into the day. Oh, okay, so we're coming up for the full moon, and the practice will be seasonally appropriate to the time of the day that it is, whether it's 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon, bit snoozy, or 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, maybe a little bit more upbeat. Do you see what I mean? So it depends. That's my answer to everything, really, is that it all depends on the time and the day and that sort of thing. But as a standard thing, say I teach an evening London class, that's an urban group of women. They come in shattered. So they start with rest. So that you come into a class on Saturday night, say in London, and you're shattered when you arrive because you've been busy doing stuff all day. You finally get to the class, get the rest, get the check-in, feel into how you're doing. And then gradually over the 2 hours, the class usually builds up to include some sound, some movement, some practices that are, you have the choice. Autumn ladies, this is the variation we're doing. Winter ladies, take a rest. Would you want to do this variation? If you're in your, autumn, basically, I say you do whatever you like. You don't argue with your autumnal crew. You give them the options, and they might be very gung-ho, but they might be really, really tender. So I'm encouraging at every point for people to listen into how their body is, even down to, instead of everyone saying right foot forward, which just, to me, I've got a knee-jerk reaction to that. It's like, it's like that. I'm not a frigging soldier. Don't tell me to put my right foot forward. I get people to check in with the flows in their nostril. People aren't even aware of this very often, but it's a really good way to develop awareness of the cycles in your body. It's like, which nostril is more open? And then we go with the flow. And it's people are like, why are we checking in with our noses before we choose which foot to put forward? But it's like, actually, we're doing that so we listen to the body. And then usually, for example, at the end of a London class, the last pose is like a protective standing pose. So people are sensible to go out into the, I don't want to end up with a relaxation because they'll be all gooey and they'll step out into North London on a Saturday night and it'll be mayhem. So I try to make sure that the flow of the class is appropriate to the place, to the people, and to the cycles of the women. So it's very difficult to say what is in any given class, but the approach is to get people to listen to their bodies, get the women to listen in so they can make choices from the options I'm giving them. And the options will always include, you don't need to move a muscle. You can do the whole thing with your energy body. You don't even need to get out from under the duvet, but evidently you have come to the class. So let me make you comfortable. The intention is everybody leaves feeling like they've had attention paid to what they need rather than they've come in and done what they've been told to do, So that's the model. And we use a lot of mudras. So this lovely mudra here, this kind of like Tao. I use a lot of connections with hands and mudras. So we're working energetically to keep the flow of positive vitality through the body. And if somebody's, got menstrual pain or they're getting a hot flush or whatever's going on, we've got yoga therapeutic stuff. You don't have to leave. We say, no, you can learn useful self-care techniques, like what poses are going to be maybe more useful for you in particular if you've got ovulation pain or, if your breasts are tender, things like that. Does that give you a feel?
Yeah, it just feels like such a relief to hear. That sounds like it's tuning into me and following my flow, and also with some guidance, and also in a group and with some ideas and with some structure. So I'm learning stuff and I'm listening to myself.
Yeah, it's also, I think, a really beautiful thing for women to practice together in kindness. There's no competition. There can't be any competition because everybody's doing something different. Whereas if you line people up, and some schools of yoga train their teachers to line the mats up so they can see who's getting it wrong. I'm like, you can't get this wrong. That's one of my instructions is, listen, this is your practice. You can't do it wrong. I'm here to be of service to you as a teacher. And that's quite an interesting thing because a lot of the structures of yoga teaching are very interestingly ego driven about the person at the front with everybody lined up. Sometimes they're even on a frigging stage with a headset. And they're, the bendy, glamorous one, the hairless, gorgeous one who's showing you what to do. And it sets up some quite unpleasant power. It doesn't actually set up power imbalances. It perpetuates disempowerment. And basically, I don't enjoy that. And I'm interested in taking apart those systems so that people can be free. So I've started in a small way with letting women in yoga classes do what suits them best with good guidance from people who know, but who are basically devolving, saying, you're the expert. You're, Melanie, are the expert on Melanie's body because you've been living in it all your life.
And I'm knowing when I'm overstretching, I can feel it just before that. So, but also what I wanted to ask is, sometimes in yoga classes, I've known I've been twisting or doing it in the wrong way. I guess that I'm thinking, oh, that's not good for my back. So, but I'm not quite sure. I do need some adjustment to do it like correctly. Yeah.
So, and I think that's an important part, because if you focus on end gaining, like somebody shows you what something looks like from the outside in their body, what tends to happen in yoga classes is people think, oh, I've got to make it look like that. And they'll do whatever they can and they'll accept whatever adjustments are given because it feels like it's going to get you to the end of achieving the way that pose looks. But actually that isn't really helpful at all. And it's better. Sometimes I'll demonstrate, but mostly I'll encourage people to be with the process of the pose, because a lot of the time with these, a lot of it's rhythmic. You don't get into a pose and hold it steady. What you're doing is you're rhythmically moving into it, which works for most women's bodies better. So there's a lot of rhythm and repetition and simple movements, so that as it starts to feel good, for example, with people's lower backs, which are often a source of grief for them. Yeah. So we're working with rhythm and we're working with strength and suppleness to find ways that actually you can really benefit yourself by the pose rather than try to achieve the pose and sacrifice yourself for the pose. And people do that. And then you get graduated onto the next level and you can do that. I mean, what the frig is that about? I mean, I often ask these questions. So what is this about? When you go, like, what are these people doing? So when you come into a class and you see what they're doing, and when you say what these people are doing is listening to their bodies and doing what nourishes and strengthens them, you know, that's what they're doing. And that isn't always the case in yoga.
So I've heard you mention there's a thread going through what you've been talking about, Yoga Nidra. Could you explain what that is?
With great pleasure. Nidra is a Sanskrit word that means sleep. And yoga is a word that you can translate into lots of ways. But basically, it's kind of in some ways about connection with what is. And Yoga Nidra is the sleep of the yogis, or the yoga of sleep. So it's a meditative, heart-based practice that focuses on our innate capacity, which I have to say many people are losing, but the innate capacity to fall asleep. Like everybody knows at some point, even if they haven't slept very well recently, they know what that feels like. So in Yoga Nidra, we're creating through words a practice of just, you don't move, you just get in a comfortable position, and lots of different comfortable positions, and you rest and you listen. So the only thing you're really doing is listening. But in fact, you're not really doing anything at all, because the process of letting your body rest in this place brings you into quite an interesting state that's very, very healing. It's the kind of state in which your body repairs itself. It's very restorative. It's fantastic for like post-surgery. It's fantastic if you've not been very well. It's really good for reboosting vitality. But it's also a beautiful meditative practice. It's very heart-based. And it allows you also to connect with dream states, creativity, intuition, and getting insights. A lot of people do say they fall asleep, but it's a trance work practice. So it's like yogic trance work, and it's hugely accessible. Everybody can do it. You know, you can even do it if you're deaf. You can lip read, you know, so long as you can do it sitting up. Most people like to do it lying down, and all you need is an audio, basically. That's Yoga Nidra. And I think I use that in every practice, whether I'm doing one-to-one yoga therapy or group practices, and it enables the person to tune in to what state, what cycle of energy they're in, you know, because in the day you've got these different rhythms of energy, which is why some people lose the will to live at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They're like, okay, call it off, game over, you know. And that's a really good time to do Yoga Nidra, because you go with the flow and then you kind of come up and it gives you a little boost. It's a very precious practice, and it's becoming more and more popular as more and more people get sleep difficulties and are exhausted. And, you know, so it's very helpful. I'd say it's the key ingredient for maintaining well-being, really, and for making sure your yoga practice is appropriate. If you do the Yoga Nidra first, you're not really going to hurt yourself, because you tune in with the state that you're in before you begin to move.
Oh, yeah, I understand. You can start to begin by listening and tuning in and feeling your own energy flow. So when you get someone saying, okay, so feel this, and is this right for you? I can actually feel it.
Yeah. It's a listening practice of and some people will say it's just like a power nap, but it's not. I mean, it has elements of that, and you can, but to me, it's like, it's my favorite practice, and it makes all the difference to people. You know, it makes all the difference. It's really, really nourishing.
And I think you've got some free ones on your website as well.
Yes, you can go to the Yoga Nidra Network, and the Yoga Nidra Network is .org, and there's practices that I've recorded, practices that my husband, who co-founded that network, has recorded, and loads of teachers, 18 different languages up there. So my intention is for everybody in the world to be able to listen to Yoga Nidra for free in their mother tongue. Slowly, this is unfolding. But the Yoga Nidra Network is a great resource, because a lot of the teachers, and we're doing a very permissive, creative, responsive Nidra. There are some very strict schools of Yoga Nidra that say don't sleep, don't move, don't do this, and you lie there being a bit scared, in the same way that you can go into a yoga class and be a little bit scared that you might do it wrong. Yeah. But the teachers that I train, evidently, are not like that. They're not going to say that to you. They're going to say, relax, you know, you can't do this wrong. This is your practice. You can enjoy it. And kids, we do it for kids, we do it for adults, we do it for people passing out of this life, for people full of beans. It's truly wondrous. I can't say enough good things about it. And it's and what other kind of yoga are you going to do if you're in your bleed? You got your moon time. Do you want to do a sun salutation? You do not. No, probably not. I mean, maybe you do, in which case, fine, go ahead and do it. I'd say you question really what your body's calling for. And quite likely it's going to say, will you just rest for a bit? Oh, I know, I'll put my Yoga Nidra on and have a listen and reconnect. So.
And for those listening, I'm going to put the links in the show notes so you can go to the Yoga Nidra network and download those and give it a go.
Have fun listening.
And I think also on your website, Uma, is a list of people who've trained with you, so people can go to that, and I'll put again the link in the show notes so that they can see in their area.
Yeah. The womb yoga teachers listing lists people. There's a lot of people now who've been doing this work, and you can find out. And some of them specialize in particular life phases, so they're really good on postnatal recovery, or they're good on pregnancy. But a lot of the women who've done my well woman kind of yoga therapy training, they'll be very amenable to and skilled. Actually, they're very skillful, amazing teachers. Just trying to make sure that everybody's getting a nourishing practice. So that's on the womb yoga teachers site. Okay,
great. And a couple of more questions about where women can access this. So first one is, women like me, I'm not a yoga teacher. I want to come and maybe do a class, but I'd love to come and do 3 days, 4 days and rest. Do you offer longer retreats like that?
Yeah, I mean, periodically I offer women's retreats with yoga and Yoga Nidra. And often I collaborate. I tend not to do it on my own anymore. I much prefer to offer it in a collaboration. So I collaborate with a beautiful sister called Shivani Mata. And we've, for the last few years, have run a beautiful women's retreat in Wiltshire. We do that around Mother's Day. And it's nice to come on your own, but it's nice to bring a friend. So that's an annual thing. We do women's. And a lot of the teachers I train also offer retreats. And then I find that a really nice way into it, some people come we do these weekends of Yoga Nidra where you just come and dive into that. And that's like an immersion experience. So they're happening pretty much monthly in different places in the country. And and I take them away. So sometimes people come on the trainings with me and they come just for the retreat experience, because we go to India, we go to Portugal, we go to beautiful, really places with good ecological kind of sustainability kind of ethos, and people drop into that environment. A lot of people come back, they do the training and they just come back to do take those experiences, and that could be a whole week of deeply connecting with those practices.
Oh, that sounds lovely. So you've got your training as well, and is that just for yoga teachers, or can anybody come to that who just wants to go deeper?
Yeah, that's a good question. Initially, when I started it out, it was all yoga teachers, but what has happened over the years is really good. So we always have a real mixed bag of women from different pathways. So we've welcomed people who are not yoga teachers, who have an interest in using, say, Yoga Nidra or using the womb yoga practices therapeutically. So people like massage therapists and counselors and acupuncturists and doulas and menstruality educators, and all of these folk tend to come, and then they get the benefit of these practices that they can share with their clients and with themselves. So so you don't have to be a yoga teacher to do any of my trainings, actually.
That's cool.
It's coming up in India, and I'm actually going to be in the United States very shortly in October. So I'll be in the Californian redwoods. So that will be an amazing place to do Yoga Nidra. Incredible, very. So I try to choose places in the world that are connecting with nature, and a lot of, basically, in order to respect ourselves, we need to reconnect with nature, so that actually the reconnection with the earth herself helps us to reconnect with the needs of the earth, of our own body. So we lay this body on the body of the earth. And that's why I travel to the redwoods. So if you want to come and join me there, that will be amazing. Or in Kerala, or here, I'm in Stroud. We have people come here to the Cotswolds.
Yeah. So if someone's listening today, they can go and download a free Yoga Nidra already. Do you have any videos that people could try out?
Yes.
Thought you might.
Yeah, we've got some lovely videos. There are videos of all the basic practices. There's sort of adapted sun salutes that are moving, and they're all available on the Womb Yoga site, so you can download them. And there's also information. I work a lot with the wisdom goddesses, the 10 great wisdom goddesses. They're called the Mahavidyas, and there's some beautiful download, like a little course about how they influence and help us understand our cyclical being. So there's that kind of thing. So you can follow the videos and learn about the wisdom goddesses and listen to the Yoga Nidra.
Awesome. Sounds like a terrible job, Uma, traveling all over the world to gorgeous places, doing Yoga Nidra and just relaxing and listening to your body. I mean, why did you come up with that one?
I don't know. I mean, my intention is that it's nourishing. So, even though I have the last couple of years have been very, very, very busy, but in fact, the nature of the work that I do does make it possible to show that you can really be nourished, because people's lives are demanding. And to have these practices is, to be honest, I began to wonder how anybody can manage without them. If I didn't have these womb yoga practices and Yoga Nidra, I know I couldn't manage to be of service in the world, and I wouldn't be a very happy human. So they were like a gift to us as humans. So I'm on a mission to share these beautiful gifts with everybody.
Thank you so much for all your information, for pointing us to the free stuff that we can try out straight away, and for setting up all that stuff that we can come to if we want.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much, Melanie.
Is there anything else you wish to say, Uma? Uma?
I like to thank you for the work that you're doing in sharing all this, women's cycle awareness. I think it's really crucial. It will save the world if we can really get women connected with our cycles, because if we're tuning into these cycles, we're tuning into the very spirit of life herself. So, I want to thank you and, invite people who love reading. I have written a very, very big fat book, like it's huge. If you get into it, it's called Yoni Shakti, and that just means source power. And that's, if you get into you want a deep dive, that's it.
Well, Russell Brand's reading it, so that's it.
Well, yes, a lot of people have sent me this lovely video of the delightful Mr. Brand, bless him, doing wonderful stuff around gratitude. And everyone said, look, Uma, your book is in the background. So if Russell happens to be listening, I'd love to have a conversation with you about the importance of honouring women's cycles, and sex and God and cycles and what we can do to really nourish ourselves in this life, so we can be of service to people and be a bit nicer.
Absolutely. Everyone, the links will all be in the show notes, so you can go and check everything out. And thank you so much, Uma, for your time and for your energy and for your work.
Thank you very much, Melanie. It's a delight to share with you. Thank you.
See you later.
See you.
Wow, and wow again. What an awesome episode. What an awesome woman. What fabulous information. I hope you've got loads of juicy wisdom to take away from that episode to help you key into yourself and your own flow. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Stitcher, all the links I mentioned are in the show notes. So if you go to thesacredwomb.com/womb yoga, all one word, thesacredwomb.com/womb yoga, then all the links are there. You can try the practices. There's some videos there and there's some yoga nidras as well. So ladies, once again, I hope you enjoy that and I look forward to seeing you next time. I really hope you enjoyed the podcast and that you got some useful tips out of it that can make a genuine difference in your daily life. And if you'd love to work deeper with this stuff, then do head on over to thesacredwomb.com, where you can sign up to receive the weekly newsletter and an invite to our private Facebook group, where you can share, learn and grow with like-minded women in a safe, supported space. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do leave us a rating and your comments are very, very welcome. And I'll see you next time.